closer, the more desperate some vulnerable candidates can become. So it's no surprise that we're hearing reports of Democrats keeping their distance from their highest-ranking party member in the House of Representatives, Nancy Pelosi, of course. According to this latest Fox News Opinion Dynamics poll, a majority of voters have a negative opinion of the House Speaker, 56% unfavorable, while 24% favorable. And even some of Pelosi's spokespeople say they understand the cold shoulder, but they add candidates should proceed with caution. Joining us now is Ron Bonjean, former communications director to former House Speaker Dennis Hastert and former senior advisor to former Senate Majority Trent Lott, both Republicans, and Richard Socrates, a Democratic strategist and former special assistant to President Clinton. Gentlemen, thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you.
Richard, I want to start with you because with Democrats distancing themselves from Nancy Pelosi, obviously this is a very bold move. It might even make them seem as if they're alienating themselves from their own party. Couldn't that hurt them?
Well, I actually don't think it's that bold a move. I think that what you see customarily is when incumbency or incumbents are unpopular, that people running for office run against the notion of incumbency. Her numbers reflect that most people think the country's headed in the wrong direction. We're in very difficult economic times. Her own personal numbers, Nancy Pelosi's, are actually slightly better than Congress's overall. So I don't think this is unusual, though. I think that history will record that she's been a very effective speaker. She's very popular with the rank and file. I think this is, standard campaign practice.
Okay, Ron, I mean, much like the GOP presidential candidates in 2007, they called themselves the change candidate, and that would be why they wanted to distance themselves from George W. Bush. But how do you campaign as the change candidate, let's say, if you're an incumbent? I mean, the big difference, obviously, is that they were campaigning for a seat that they didn't already have.
Yeah, I was going to say this is an unusual situation.
Yeah.
I mean, Speaker Pelosi is well known in the United States. I mean, go back to the 80s, nobody knew who Tip O'Neill was. And the House Democratic majority right now is like the Titanic, it's going down, and most pollsters recognize that. And so House Democrats are trying to distance themselves as much as possible, and it really doesn't matter what they necessarily say about the captain. The fact is the ship is sinking, and I don't think that's necessarily going to save them. Although in some races where some Democrats have voted against health care reform and have voted against spending, this could be a tipping point.
All right. Ron, the Republicans have worked to define Pelosi as what's wrong with Democrats. Even the House Speaker's own spokesperson, as we just read earlier, they concede that they understand why candidates would want to disassociate themselves with what is seen as wrong in Washington. But you don't want to indict the other party. How do you get votes, I suppose? How do you campaign in a way where you are not necessarily alienating the Speaker, considering the Speaker's not going anywhere anytime soon? And then after the elections, what happens?
Well, I'll tell you, I don't think it really matters if they try to alienate the Speaker or not. If I were them, I would do everything they can to distance themselves from Washington. Right now, you're talking about the outside candidates versus the inside candidates, in the Republicans versus Democrats.
That is excellent advice from a man who knows what he's talking about.
And if I were a Democrat, I would be trying to campaign on everything what's wrong with Washington. But the problem is, they promised change in 2008, and they didn't bring it.
Well,
so it's going to be very difficult for
exactly.
them to accomplish that.
He knows.
And Speaker Pelosi is the albatross around a lot of these Democrats.
Richard, go ahead.
I would just want to say Ron knows exactly what he's talking about, having been there and having worked for a Speaker of the House. I mean, anything associated with government in Washington right now is unpopular, highly unpopular. That's because people are unhappy with the way the government's been working or not working. It's because we've been having a hard time getting out of the worst economic disaster that we've had since the Great Depression. It's going to take time. The numbers are headed in the right direction. The Democrats are going to have a positive message. I think it's going to be a very close election. I don't think the Democrats are going to lose control of the House, but it is going to be close. And Nancy Pelosi stands for a lot of what's been happening, but she will be regarded as a very effective speaker when compared to others in history, and we'll just have to see what the election holds.
I just want to know what you think of Democrats, how far they really should go when it comes to distancing themselves from Pelosi. Congressman Bobby Bright, who happens to occupy a heavily Republican Montgomery area seat, and I know you know what I'm about to talk about here, of Alabama, was asked last week about whether he planned to vote for Pelosi as Speaker, and he went so far as to joke, and I'm quoting here, that she might even get sick and die. I mean, that is going really far, and not be able to seek her post again. I mean, what kind of message does that send?
Yeah, no, I'll tell you that I do think that crosses the line. When you're talking about policy issues and distancing yourself from the Speaker on those terms, it makes a lot of sense, because Speaker Pelosi, you know, she was an effective speaker, but effective in the wrong way. She took the country in the wrong direction.
Right, that's exactly the point. That's what he's saying.
And Democrats, you know, if they get personal by joking about her death or demise, I mean, it really just shows how desperate they are. But it does cross the line. I think it's boomerangs on them. I don't think it'll have a positive effect or help them in the election.
All right, well, we appreciate both of you coming on. Ron Bonjean and Richard Socarides, thank you very much for talking to us. This will be interesting.
Julie.
Wow, Pelosi alienating herself from the entire Democratic Party. Thank you so much. It's interesting.
Well, a second drill arriving on the scene of the mine collapse in Chile. Here, a convoy of trucks carrying the new drill and equipment. That machine will try to dig a brand new tunnel to try to reach those 33 trapped